No longer. Chapter 7, Pit. They had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and theirs was to hurt men 5 months. Revelation 9:10. His description, that of verse 11, is that of the evil angels loosed on certain tongues or countries. Apollyon, as we have seen, refers to Napoleon Bonaparte. He was to be loosed on the Greek-tongued peoples, or Gentiles, as the Bible so often refers to them. These are the non-Jews, and in fact Napoleon carried out his destruction of human life on the Gentile world. In Napoleon's time, anti-Semitism was primarily an underground activity and not openly discussed. However, by the 20th century, the tide of anti-Semitism was building and gaining in popularity. The other angel from the bottomless pit is called Abaddon. We could deduce the name A Bad One from his name. As we shall discover, Adolf Hitler fits this description to a T. He, as an evil angel, was loosed upon the Hebrews, or Jews as they were called in the mid-20th century. And as we all know, documentation of the murderous destruction of millions of the Jewish race is understood as historical fact by all the world as we near the close of the 20th century. Adolf Hitler rose to power in a similar manner to that of his predecessor, Napoleon. They were both outsiders. Hitler was actually born in Austria, but as a Bavarian he chose to rise in the German nation. Germany had just suffered a bitter defeat in World War I, and its economy was in chaos. Yet there were those appearing to prosper. Among the Jews who maintained an element of prosperity were many businessmen. They were prominent in the worlds of art and music. These were two of Hitler's loves. He was an artist by trade, but a frustrated one. He studied art and was a good and diligent student, but he failed to excel in his painting, and as he desperately wanted to do. Twice he failed to gain acceptance into the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. His work was precise and well executed, but he lacked artistic talent. His failure to satisfy his teachers was very frustrating to young Adolf and left a deep wound, which never healed. The young Hitler was also a tireless fan of the opera, especially Wagner, and his favorite work was Lohengrin. He is said to have witnessed this opera more than a dozen times in person. He blamed the Jews for much of Germany's troubles after World War I, including Germany's loss of the war and subsequent economic collapse. This collapse inevitably led to inflation of terrible proportions. He fanatically cried out that through their espousal of pacifism, the Jews were trying to conquer the world. Therefore, he charged that the governments of Germany and Russia had to be overthrown in order that the ancient prophecies might be fulfilled. Surprisingly, this was one of his few accurate statements. This charge referred not only to his hatred of Jews, but also his abhorrence of communism. In preparation for one of his early speeches, he imagined himself to be Jesus Christ, and his mission was to descend on Germany and scourge the corrupt. Lost on Hitler was the fact that Jesus was a Jew, and that Hitler himself may have also been part Jew. He continued to develop Napoleonic and even Messianic ideas. He was destined to be Germany's savior, or so he thought. He would continue to draw parallels, especially with Napoleon's return to Paris after his first exile from the island of Elba. Hitler's ascent to power was by way of many detours. His rejection by a Viennese Academy of Art and his mother's death hit him very hard. He was gassed in a battle in World War I and lay blind in a hospital bed for 3 weeks. But his stint in prison, which would derail the plans of many a mortal man, only served to crystallize his motives and purpose. He wrote his autobiography, Mein Kampf, while in prison. In his book, he clarified his anti-Semitic feelings and his grand scheme for his beloved Germany. One of his goals was to gain control of Germany and subsequently, due to the addictive power of his disease, gain control of the entire world. With that goal complete, he would then solve the Jewish question. He would solve it in the name of God. He stated, I am convinced that I am acting as the agent of our Creator by fighting off the Jews. I am doing the Lord's work. There is another great lie authored by the evil one himself. To satisfy one's own self-ambition in the name of God is to condemn oneself to eternal destruction. Satan repeats this mistake over and over again. Napoleon and Hitler remain the classic examples of the devil's evilness controlling the minds of men. Napoleon and Hitler were true geniuses in the history of the world, able to mold the minds of men, but they were simply instruments of the devil. Through these two gentlemen, more destruction was wrought on this planet than by anyone before or since. At one Nazi celebration, Hitler further compounded the great lie by stating that Christ was the greatest early fighter in the battle against the world enemy, the Jews. He felt Christ's life purpose was the battle against capitalism and the Jew. After all, his enemy, the Jews, crucified Christ. Hitler announced that he would take over Jesus' task, the work that Christ started but could not finish. I, Adolf Hitler, will conclude. Hitler did not consider Christ a Jew. Because of the Immaculate Conception, he felt him to be only half Jew. Hitler repeatedly used Christ or God as a reason to fulfill his two great ambitions. Number one was securing Lebensraum for the German people by eastward expansion, and number two, eliminate the Jewish threat. The cost to humanity is beyond any description, either verbal or mental, and as John the Revelator describes in just 22 short chapters, this Holocaust is only the tip of an overwhelming iceberg driven by the devil that will destroy possibly one half of all human life that has ever existed on this tumultuous planet. Hitler spent a lot of time in his early years in deep and contemplative thought. He was a loner and had ample opportunity to formulate ideas or receive them from his evil controllers. He spent time on the front lines in World War I and then more time behind bars. He truly was one of the world's great thinkers, but unfortunately for millions, he constructed his ideas on incorrect and false premises. In other words, he built his house on the sand, and everyone knows what happens to houses built on the sand. It is amazing that so few saw this terrible tragedy coming. It was as if the world was suddenly caught with a phantom punch, not unlike that of Muhammad Ali in his title fight with Sonny Liston years later. Liston never saw it coming. The crowd didn't think Ali had even connected with Liston's jaw, and the public didn't give Ali much respect at first. Similarly, the Allies never saw Hitler's first punch. The powers of the day didn't take Hitler seriously, and the world initially gave him little or no respect. This all played perfectly into the hands of the Nazi leader. However, Hitler was understood by one man, Winston Churchill. Churchill was an astute scholar of history and an excellent judge of character. Winston Churchill recognized Hitler's evil motives from the very beginning and never wavered in his stand against the shrewd Nazi leader. Hitler was described during the time of accession of the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia as appealing to the previously downtrodden Germans, but not to foreigners. He listened to his own conscience as a mysterious voice giving suggestions. Hitler acted on those words without question or hesitation. The man in control of himself can choose not to obey irrational ideas, but the man out of control or under the control of another will obey any idea, rational or not. The future of Europe and the world was literally being controlled by the devil himself. We have our Creator to thank for giving vision to the Allied leaders to press on and annihilate the angel of the bottomless pit.